And then in verse 6, the Beatitude statement that we're going to look at specifically today, he says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Jesus says, when you hunger and thirst for righteousness, you will be filled. And yet so many homes today are not filled with that which matters most. But they're searching and striving for anything that would bring meaning and joy. Why is that? Because as we just talked about, we're filling our lives with things that really don't matter. We're not hungering and thirsting to do things God's way. We're hungering and thirsting to do things our way. And as a result, we're not experiencing many of the blessings that God has in store for us. We're missing out on what it truly means to be blessed. So let me ask you a question. Let me ask you another question. In your home, what are you hungering and thirsting for? And I want you to glaze over that question. I want you to really think about it. In your home, what do you hunger for? What do you thirst for? What is it that you're pursuing? What matters most to your family? Do yourself a favor and be honest with yourself, because this is the place to begin. Unless we're willing to be honest with ourselves in this area, it's going to be difficult for us to move forward. We have to be honest. And maybe take a minute. There's a space in your notes. Maybe take a minute and just jot some of those things down in your notes. It's okay to be honest. It's okay to be real. For some, maybe you can honestly say with integrity that we're here to please God. That's why we exist. And that's awesome if that's the case. But the truth is, I think for many of us, if we're honest, we're hungering and thirsting for something else. We're looking to other things to fill us and to satisfy us. Maybe it's our image, or popularity, or success, or comfort. Maybe it's security or acceptance from others, or maybe it's just pleasure. Maybe for some of us, it's just rest and relaxation. We work hard during the week, and we live for the weekend so we can do whatever we want to do. And again, there's not necessarily anything wrong with those things. It's just that it's not what God has called you to hunger and to thirst for. It's not meant to be the driving force in your life. And ultimately, those things will never, hear me, they will never lead us to the place of fulfillment and blessing that we all long for, and that in reality, God wants to give us so badly. They will never, those things, you can pursue them all you want. And so many people have lived their lives pursuing them before you. And I don't know of anybody that's died and gone to their grave and said, those are the things that led me to a place of blessing and fulfillment where I truly felt satisfied and happy and content, divinely or supremely favored. God's hand was upon my life because I had all this stuff. I don't know anybody. Correct me if I'm wrong. That is not what God has called us to hunger and thirst for. So what do we do? What do we do when we realize that we're hungering and thirsting for the wrong things? What do we do when we realize that we have an appetite for things that ultimately do not satisfy and are not best for us? Well, the answer is, and it may sound overly simple, and it is overly simple, we change our appetites. We change our appetites. A year or so ago, my wife and I decided we were gonna get healthy. So we decided to cut out processed food and artificial sugars and to just try to eat really clean. Now you need to know something. You need to know that I love to eat. You may not guess it by my stature, but I love to eat. And so going into this, I wasn't quite sure how this was going to go, or if I was even going to make it through it. But we decided to give it a go. And the first couple of weeks, let me tell you, were pretty torturous. They were awful. I was having horrible cravings, and I just wanted to eat junk food all the time, to be honest with you. My body was starving for those things I used to give it all the time. But we stuck with it. We hung in there. We pushed through the cravings. We were disciplined and did the right thing, and an interesting thing began to happen. My cravings actually started to subside. And on top of that, my body actually started feeling really good. Some people that are close to me can attest. I had more energy than I knew what to do with. I was working out like 3 or 4 times a day because my body felt great. I had a ton of energy and I was feeling amazing. And you know, we stuck with it for quite a while, but there comes a point where you're like, hey, life is short. We don't have to be so strict. Let's eat a little junk food, right? And so we did. What's also really fascinating, though, is that eating that junk food didn't go like it used to. It didn't even really taste that good. And in fact, it made me feel pretty miserable. For like the rest of the day, like I couldn't function. And what I started to realize is that the things that I craved had significantly changed. As I fed on stuff that was better for me, I stopped craving the junk food that wasn't as good for me. And my appetite had significantly changed. We aren't eating nearly as clean as what we were, but let me tell you, to this day, I can't eat that much junk food. I used to pound 3 or 4 Mountain Dews a day, and I can barely drink one anymore. I usually get through a half a can and I'm done. I can't do it anymore, and I feel miserable for it. Here's the thing. If you start pursuing God and you start really seeking Him, what's going to happen is you're going to begin to experience the benefits of walking with Him and doing life His way. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, but you'll start to long for more of Him. I promise you, if you start to seek Him, you start to really pursue Him. It's not going to happen overnight, but you'll start to see that this increased appetite begins to develop in you, that you want more of Him. You want more and more to do life God's way. And the junk food of this world, which distracted you, that wasn't good for you and didn't really satisfy you, it isn't going to be at the top of your cravings anymore because your appetite is changing. You're hungering and thirsting for righteousness, and as a result, you're fulfilled and you're satisfied as you're growing in your relationship with God and you're serving and doing His will. Isn't that amazing? Hunger and thirst. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be what? Filled. They'll be filled. They'll be satisfied. So how does this translate then to our families and our homes? How do we lead our families toward hungering and thirsting for righteousness? Let me give you a few things here, okay? Let's get practical. First of all, there are a couple of approaches that Christians are well known for taking that we may be prone to take that just don't work. So let me take a look at those things first. I want to give you a couple things that don't work so you don't make the mistake and walk these roads, okay? And then we'll talk about what does work. The first thing that doesn't work, if you're taking notes, is legalistic Christianity. Legalistic Christianity. What is legalistic Christianity? It's when we reduce Christianity from a genuine relationship with the God of the universe who loves you more than anything and wants nothing but the best for your life to a list of rules of things you do and don't do to be a quote-unquote good Christian. So when we take a genuine relationship with the God of the universe who's madly in love with you and wants to be in a relationship with you, who wants it more than anything, and we reduce that down just to this rules of do these things and don't do these things, and then we're good Christians. We take the relationship out of the picture. And here's the problem, here's the issue, and you can write this down if you're taking notes. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. Rules without relationship only leads to rebellion. See, listen, the only reason that we choose to do certain things as Christians and we choose to not do other things in a way that truly transforms us on a long-term basis is because we have a relationship with a God that we're convinced loves us more than anything and that He wants nothing but the best for our lives. And so as we commit to do some things and to not do other things, we believe that it's only to our benefit to do life God's way. See, when you're in a relationship with God and you're convinced that He loves you and He only has your best interest in mind, then following the rules isn't such a discipline, is it? Because you know God loves you and He only has your best interest in mind. And so it doesn't make it any easier necessarily to follow the rules. There's still struggle in that. There's still temptation. We're still human beings, but it changes the motive behind it, why we do what we do. See, the worst thing we can do for our families is to try to shove God down their throats with a bunch of rules they need to follow to be quote-unquote good Christians. Please don't ever do that. On the flip side, the best thing we can do for our families is to model and to lead them towards a genuine relationship with the God of the universe, who is crazy for them and wants nothing but the best for their lives. See, if they genuinely pursue God and they fall in love with Him, listen, then and only then do they start to see the value in living God's way. It's all about the relationship. Don't ever lose sight of that. So legalistic Christianity never works. The second thing that doesn't work, if you're taking notes, is lukewarm Christianity. Lukewarm Christianity. Lukewarm Christianity is when we say we believe in God, but we live as if He doesn't exist. In other words, we believe in God, but ignore everything that He tells us to do and the ways in which He wants us to live our lives. It's Christian in name only, but no real passion for living life God's way. Listen to what James says in James chapter 2. These are pretty cutting words. James chapter 2 and verse 19, he says, "You say you have faith, for you believe that there is one God. Good for you. Even the demons believe this, and they tremble in terror. How foolish. Can't you see that faith without actions is dead? It's useless." James says, so you believe in God. Big deal. You're no different than the demons. What really matters, what really counts, is when that belief transforms and changes the way we live our lives. And so this leads us to the big idea that's really going to guide us through this series. You're going to hear this over and over again. This is the big idea sort of behind our series, and that's this. We are not just a Christian family. We are a Christ-centered home. We're not just a Christian family. We are a Christ-centered home. We're not Christian in name only. We center our lives around Jesus. There's a big difference, isn't there? You know, we have 5 core values that lie at the foundation of this church. And these core values really propel us to do what we do as a church. And the first one of those centers around this idea. Our core values statement is this. It's putting Christ at the center of everything. It's our very first core value as a church that propels us to do what we do, that we live to put Christ at the center of everything we do. The values statement that we've written for that core value says this. Listen to this. It says, God was never meant to be just a part of our life, but to be at the center of every part of our lives. Therefore, we will strive to align our desires with His will and to put Christ at the center of everything that we think, speak, and do. Listen, you can call yourself a duck, but if you don't quack and you can't fly and you don't lay eggs, you're probably not a duck. And we can call ourselves Christians because we believe in God, but at some point that belief has to begin to impact the way we think, speak, and act. To be Christians, the word Christian literally means little Christ, follower of Jesus. To be Christ followers, we have to start to think, speak, and act more like Jesus. And it's that relationship with Him that drives us to live our lives in a certain way. And that relationship begins to transform us from the inside out. And it starts to impact the thoughts that I think and the things that I say and the things that I do and the way that I live my life, because Christ is at the center of it all.